My girlfriend of 3 years convinced everyone I was controlling and abusive, turning my friends against me and playing the victim while secretly planning to steal my inheritance money and run off with my best friend. She had no idea I'd been recording our conversations for months after noticing her stories never matched up. Hey viewers, welcome to the channel. We are just starting and your support means a lot. If you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. I'm David, 28 years old, and I thought I knew what love was supposed to feel like until I met Sarah. She was everything I thought I wanted in a partner: beautiful, charming, confident, and seemingly devoted to our relationship. For the first year, everything felt perfect. She'd surprise me with my favorite meals, remember every little detail I mentioned, and constantly tell me how lucky she felt to have found me. My friends were envious, my family adored her, and I genuinely believed I'd found my person. The changes started so gradually that I didn't even notice them at first. Sarah began making small comments about my friends, nothing too obvious, just little observations that planted seeds of doubt. She'd mention how Jake seemed to interrupt me a lot, or how Emma always seemed to be competing with me for attention. At first, I brushed it off as her being protective, maybe even a little jealous, which I found endearing rather than concerning. But then the comments became more frequent and more pointed. She'd suggest that my friends didn't really care about me the way she did, that they were just using me for my generosity or my connections. When I'd disagree or defend them, she'd get this hurt look in her eyes and say something like, "I'm just trying to look out for you because I love you. I can see things you can't because you're too trusting." Slowly, I started declining invitations to hang out with my friends. It wasn't that Sarah explicitly forbade me from seeing them; she was too smart for that. Instead, she'd get quiet and withdrawn whenever I made plans without her, or she'd suddenly have a crisis that needed my immediate attention. There was always a reason why I needed to choose between her and them, and because I loved her, I chose her every time. The isolation happened so gradually that I didn't realize how cut off I'd become until it was already too late. Sarah had become my entire social world, and she made sure I was grateful for her presence in my life. She'd constantly remind me how other guys treated their girlfriends poorly, how lucky I was to have someone who cared about me so much, how she'd given up opportunities and friendships to prioritize our relationship. About 1.5 years into our relationship, my grandfather passed away unexpectedly. He'd been like a father to me growing up, especially after my dad died when I was 12. Grandpa had always been my anchor, the person who believed in me unconditionally and encouraged me to pursue my dreams. His death hit me harder than I could have anticipated. Sarah was incredible during that time. She held me while I cried, took care of all the practical details I couldn't handle, and stayed by my side through the funeral and the difficult weeks that followed. When I found out that Grandpa had left me a significant inheritance enough to pay off my student loans, buy a house, and still have money left over for the future, Sarah was the first person I told. Her reaction was everything I'd hoped for. She cried with joy, talked about how proud Grandpa would be knowing I could use his gift to build a better life, and even suggested we start looking at houses together. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy about something, and sharing that happiness with Sarah made it feel even more meaningful. That's when things started getting really strange. Sarah began pushing hard for us to move in together, specifically suggesting we use part of my inheritance for a down payment on a house. When I mentioned wanting to take some time to grieve and make thoughtful decisions about such a big purchase, she got upset and accused me of not trusting her or not being serious about our relationship. "After everything I've done for you, after how I've supported you through losing your grandfather, you won't even consider building a future with me," she'd say, tears streaming down her face. What am I supposed to think about where this relationship is going? Guilt was overwhelming. Here was this woman who'd been nothing but supportive and loving, and I was apparently being selfish and commitment-phobic. So I agreed to start looking at houses, even though something in my gut told me it was too soon. But the house hunting revealed another side of Sarah I'd never seen before. She had very specific ideas about what we needed: a large, expensive home in a particular neighborhood, with features that seemed more about impressing others than about what we actually needed. When I suggested more modest options, she'd get disappointed and make comments about how she'd thought I had more ambition, more vision for our future together. Around this time, I started noticing inconsistencies in things Sarah told me. Small things at first: she'd mention having lunch with a coworker I'd never heard of, or reference conversations that didn't quite match up with what she'd told me before. When I'd ask for clarification, she'd get defensive and accuse me of not listening to her or not trusting her. The inconsistencies became more frequent and more concerning. Sarah would tell me she was working late, but when I'd call her office, her Her colleagues would say she'd left hours earlier. She'd mention plans with friends I'd never met, friends who apparently never wanted to meet me either. I'd ask about these discrepancies. She'd turn it around on me, saying I was being controlling and possessive. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she'd say, shaking her head sadly. "You're becoming one of those guys who monitors his girlfriend's every move. I never thought you'd be like this." The gaslighting was so subtle and so consistent that I started doubting my own perceptions. Maybe I was being too suspicious. Maybe grief was making me paranoid. Maybe I really was becoming controlling without realizing it. But then I overheard a phone conversation that changed everything. I'd come home early from work one day, hoping to surprise Sarah with dinner from her favorite restaurant. I could hear her talking on the phone in the bedroom, and something about her tone made me pause in the hallway instead of announcing my arrival. I know, it's taking longer than we thought," she was saying, her voice carrying a tone I'd never heard before, calculating, almost cold. "I'm telling you, this inheritance is huge, way more than we originally thought. I just need a little more time to get him to put my name on the house deed." My blood ran cold. She continued talking, and with each word, my entire relationship dissolved before my eyes. "He's so trusting, it's almost pathetic. Got him convinced that all his friends are bad influences and that I'm the only one who really cares about him. The guilt thing works perfectly every time he hesitates about something. I just remind him how much I've sacrificed for him." There was a pause, and then she laughed, a sound I'd never heard from her before, harsh and mocking. "No, he has no idea about us. He thinks you're his loyal best friend. God, men are so stupid. Marcus, I swear by the time we're done, we'll have enough to disappear and start over somewhere amazing. He'll never even see it coming. Marcus, my best friend since college, the guy who'd been my best man when I thought I might propose to Sarah someday. Friend who'd been so supportive during my grandfather's death, who'd helped me process my grief and encouraged me to take my time with big decisions." I stood in that hallway feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my relationship, my friendships, all of it was a lie. Sarah wasn't my devoted girlfriend, she was a con artist. Marcus wasn't my loyal friend, he was her accomplice. And I wasn't the lucky guy who'd found true love, I was their target. But here's the thing about being betrayed so completely after the initial shock and devastation, something else kicks in. Anger, clarity, and a burning desire to make sure they don't get away with it. I quietly left the house and spent the next few hours driving around, trying to process what I'd learned and figure out what to do next. My first instinct was to confront them immediately, to scream and rage and demand explanations. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that wouldn't accomplish anything except giving them a chance to spin the situation in their favor. Instead, I decided to do something that felt both terrifying and empowering. I was going to gather evidence and expose them properly. I went to an electronics store and bought a small digital recorder, the kind that could easily be hidden in a pocket or bag. For the next 3 weeks, I recorded every conversation I had with Sarah, every phone call, every interaction. I also started documenting her lies more carefully, keeping track of the inconsistencies in her stories, the times she claimed to be places she wasn't. The recordings were devastating. Once I started paying attention, I could hear the manipulation in almost everything Sarah said to me. She would bring up my grandfather's death to make me feel guilty whenever I questioned her judgment. She'd reference all the sacrifices she'd made for our relationship whenever I hesitated about spending my inheritance money on things she wanted. She'd consistently undermine my confidence and independence while positioning herself as my only source of support and validation. But the most damaging recording came when Marcus visited our apartment one evening while Sarah thought I was working late. I'd actually finished early and was on my way home when I decided to test something. I called Sarah and told her I'd be stuck at the office for several more hours, then hurried home and let myself in quietly. I could hear them talking in the living room, clearly comfortable and confident that they had hours before I'd return. I started recording immediately. "I can't believe how easy this has been," Sarah was saying. "He's so desperate for approval, so afraid of being abandoned. All I have to do is threaten to leave and he'll agree to anything." Marcus laughed. "Remember when you convinced him that his college friends were toxic? Look on his face when he told me he was going to distance himself from them for the sake of your relationship. Man, I almost felt bad for him. Please, he's made this so easy for us. Did you know he's already talked to a real estate agent about putting both our names on the deed? He thinks it's romantic proof that he's committed to our future together. And once the house is purchased, we wait a few months, then I'll start the divorce proceedings. Cite irreconcilable differences, maybe throw in some stuff about him being controlling. I've been laying that groundwork for months. In this state, I'll be entitled to half of everything, including the house. We sell it, split the proceeds, and disappear. What if he fights it? Sarah's laugh was chilling. With what support system? I've isolated him from everyone who might have helped him see through this, his family lives across the country. His friends think he's become a different person since we started dating, distant, unreliable, always choosing me over them. Who's going to believe him when I tell everyone how controlling and emotionally abusive he became after his grandfather died? I had to grip the wall to keep from falling over. Not only were they planning to steal my inheritance, but Sarah had spent months systematically destroying my relationships and reputation to ensure I'd have no one to turn to when she betrayed me. That's when I knew exactly what I had to do. Sarah's birthday was coming up in 2 weeks, and she'd been planning a big party for months. She'd invited all her friends, her family, and even some of my old friends, the ones she'd convinced me were bad influences, the ones I'd been too embarrassed to talk to after gradually disappearing from their lives. I helped her plan every detail of that party. I booked the venue, arranged the catering, sent out invitations, and even helped her pick out the perfect dress. She was so excited about having this big celebration, this chance to be the center of attention and show off our perfect relationship to everyone. The night of the party, I arrived early to help set up. Sarah looked absolutely stunning, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for what I'd thought we had together. Then I remembered the recordings on my phone, and my resolve strengthened. About an hour into the party, when everyone was there and the mood was festive and relaxed, I asked for everyone's attention. Sarah beamed at me, probably thinking I was going to make some romantic speech about how wonderful she was. I wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate Sarah, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Over the past few years, Sarah has taught me so much about relationships, about trust, and about the importance of really knowing the people closest to you. Sarah's smile faltered slightly, but she probably thought I was just being unusually sentimental. In fact, Sarah has been so educational that I thought tonight would be the perfect time to share some of the lessons she's taught me with all of you. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the venue sound system, something I'd arranged with the staff earlier. This first recording is from last Tuesday, when Sarah thought I was working late. Sarah's face went white as her own voice filled the room, talking about how easy it had been to manipulate me, how pathetic my need for approval was, how she and Marcus were planning to steal my inheritance and disappear together. Room went completely silent except for the sound of Sarah's recorded voice detailing their entire plan. I watched as her friends' faces changed from confusion to shock to disgust. I saw Marcus trying to quietly edge toward the exit, but my old college friend Jake, one of the people Sarah had convinced me was a bad influence, blocked his path. When the first recording ended, I played another one, this time of Sarah explaining to Marcus how she'd systematically isolated me from my friends and family, how she'd been laying the groundwork to paint me as controlling and abusive when she filed for divorce. The time I played the third, recording Sarah mocking my grief over my grandfather's death and joking about how she'd used it to manipulate me, several of her friends were openly crying. Her sister was staring at her with a look of complete horror. Sarah tried to interrupt, tried to claim the recordings were fake or taken out of context, but the evidence was overwhelming. These weren't ambiguous conversations that could be misinterpreted, they were detailed confessions of an elaborate con game. The saddest part, I said as the final recording ended, is that I really did love you. I would have done anything for you, given you anything you asked for, if you'd just been honest with me. Instead, you chose to lie, manipulate, and steal. You turned me against people who actually cared about me while pretending to be the only person I could trust. Sarah was sobbing now, but they weren't the crocodile tears I'd seen so many times before. These were tears of genuine panic and humiliation. Her carefully constructed facade had crumbled in front of everyone she'd wanted to impress. Marcus tried to speak, tried to claim he'd been manipulated too, but I cut him off. Don't, just don't. I have recordings of you laughing about how stupid and trusting I was. You were supposed to be my best friend and you helped her destroy me for money. The party ended quickly after that. Sarah's friends and family left without saying goodbye to her, most of them stopping to apologize to me on their way out. Several of my old friends came up to me, expressing shock at what they'd heard and asking if we could talk soon. Even people I'd barely known reached out to offer support and tell me they'd suspected something wasn't right about Sarah's stories. Sarah and Marcus left together, but not before Sarah tried one last manipulation tactic. She approached me with tears in her eyes and said, "I know what this looks like, but I really do love you. I got caught up in something I couldn't control, but my feelings for you were real." I looked at her for a long moment, this person who'd systematically destroyed my trust in my relationships, who'd planned to steal my inheritance and disappear, who'd been prepared to paint me as an abuser to cover her tracks. "No," I said simply. "Don't love me, you don't even know what love is." Love doesn't lie, manipulate, or plan to destroy someone for financial gain. What you felt for me was contempt, not love. You saw someone you thought was weak and trusting, and you decided to take advantage of that, but you miscalculated. What do you mean? You thought isolating me from my friends would leave me with no support system when you betrayed me. But all you really did was help me see who my real friends are. The people you convinced me were bad influences. They're the ones checking on me now, offering help, wanting to rebuild our friendships. Never stopped caring about me, I just stopped reaching out to them because of your manipulation. Sarah's face crumpled as she realized that her plan had backfired completely. Instead of leaving me isolated and defenseless, her betrayal had actually reconnected me with people who genuinely cared about my well-being. And Marcus, I continued, you two deserve each other. You're both people who see relationships as opportunities for exploitation rather than genuine connection. I hope you find whatever you're looking for together, but you won't find it with my money. In the weeks that followed, I had to rebuild almost every aspect of my life, but it felt like emerging from a fog I hadn't even realized I was living in. My old friends welcomed me back with understanding and support. My family, when I finally told them the whole story, was horrified by what Sarah had done and grateful that I'd discovered the truth before it was too late. I never did buy that house, and I never saw Sarah or Marcus again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their relationship didn't last long once they realized their plan had failed, and they had nothing to gain from each other. The hardest part wasn't losing Sarah once I understood who she really was. I realized I'd never really known her at all. Hardest part was accepting how thoroughly I'd been fooled, how my desire to be loved had made me vulnerable to someone who saw that desire as a weakness to exploit. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting the person who hurt you. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your life, rebuilding your relationships, and refusing to let their betrayal turn you into someone bitter and closed off. Sarah wanted to steal my money and disappear, but what she actually did was help me see the difference between people who love you and people who use you. I still have my grandfather's inheritance, and I've used it wisely, not for a house I didn't really want with someone who didn't really love me, but for investments in my future and donations to causes Grandpa would have supported. More importantly, I have my self-respect back, my real friendships restored, and a much clearer understanding of what genuine love actually looks like. Sarah taught me that trust should be earned, not given blindly. She taught me that love doesn't require you to abandon yourself or your other relationships. And she taught me that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who respect you the least. I wouldn't wish that kind of betrayal on anyone, but I'm grateful it happened before Sarah could do permanent damage to my life. Now when I meet someone new, I know what red flags to watch for, what manipulation tactics look like, and how important it is to maintain your independence and your other relationships even when you're deeply in love. The truth really is the sweetest revenge of all, especially when it sets you free.